here and doing what I do. I'd like for us to put our hands together and give a warm Mavuno welcome for the senior pastor of the Nairobi Chapel, Pastor Oscar Muriu. Karibu sana. Karibu sana. Pastor Oscar, we're so excited that you're here with us, particularly because you've had quite an eventful week. Karibu sana.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. Or is it good afternoon? Good afternoon, everyone. Well, forget all those wonderful things that, Pastor Kiama said, because the most recent feather to my hat is that I have also been robbed at gunpoint. And some of you heard about this last week on Sunday, that my wife and I were robbed. We were coming from an evening concert, and at a stop, two young men came up to the window, and one of them tapped the driver's window with a gun in his hand. And I rolled down my window, and of course, they immediately started grabbing at everything they could. My wife was wearing a gold-looking chain. My wife does not wear golden chains because she's been robbed before, and she just decided, if we're doing something special at dinner at home or etc., yes. But when we go out into the public, no. And so she was wearing a fake gold chain, and they snatched that, and they were after our rings and our wallets and our mobile phones. And it was a quick, grab and run sort of thing. They were very, very agitated, Are you watching? Are you watching? Has anybody seen us? And they're looking around as they're trying to rob us. They're grabbing at things, and we're telling them, just relax. I'll give you the ring. You don't have to grab at it. I'll take it off and give it to you. And we did. And they took those things and they ran off. And my wife and I, drove off. We were not carjacked as the papers reported. We just drove off and drove home, and we sort of had a bit of a laugh about it because they took, our mobile phones, and I lost my phone, she lost hers. They took our wallets. I wasn't actually carrying much money at that time. They took, my Nakumat card, my ID, my bank cards, but I immediately called the banks and canceled the cards and everything. And the rings they took were very precious to us. But the truth of the matter is, this was a ring I bought for my wife, an engagement ring, and then the wedding bands that we, gave to each other 26 years ago. I was in school, I was a broke student, and the actual economic value of that ring is very small. It was, and if they can get 1,000 bob on those rings, all the best for them. And, they took them. They had great sentimental value for my wife and I. But like somebody said, now you have an excuse to buy your wife a proper ring. So maybe now. So they took those. And we went home. And I did not know the drama that was going on behind the scenes. Somebody had seen this happening, a car that was behind us. And they immediately called up the pastors and told them Pastor Oscar and his wife have been robbed at gunpoint. The crooks got in, there were 4 thieves. They got into the car and they drove off. They're being carjacked. And so they called the police. The police put out an alert. They called Safaricom. Safaricom put a tracer on my phone, on my mobile, and on my wife's mobile. And, they started looking out for us because the car had been hijacked. Actually, we were at home. And even more than that, my wife was in the kitchen baking, and I was watching a movie after this incident. And it wasn't until about an hour after we'd gotten home, they called my daughter because, now they wanted to tell my daughters, your parents have been carjacked. And they told them, your mom and dad. And my daughter said, oh, they're here. And they said, what? And they said, yeah, they're here. Do you want to speak to mom? And, they spoke to us. And they told us, the cops are looking for you. Don't drive your car out of the home because they have your number plate. If they see the car, they'll shoot. And so stay at home. And, and it was drama. The truth is, we were not carjacked. It's just our rings and wallets and mobiles that were taken. It took all of 3 minutes for us to be robbed, and then the robbers ran off because they were afraid they would be caught. And it was so embarrassing later on trying to explain to people there really wasn't that much drama. You know, it was just a quick thing, and etc. But I do want to say thank you to all of you who remembered to pray for us. Because at the end of the day, this could have turned out badly, except that God was gracious and kind to protect us. And we were not harmed. None of us was molested. Nobody was hit. We were not pulled out of the car. It was very, quickly done. And neither of us were harmed in any way. And so thank you very much. And there wasn't really the drama that you heard about. The papers got it wrong. But they were trying to do the right thing. And so thank you for all who prayed for us. Well, lovely. This month, we are going to be looking together at the matter of money. And I will be with you over 4 Sundays of this month, today included, talking about the 4 horsemen of financial ruin. Let me tell you where the idea comes from, okay? In the book of Revelation, chapter 6, the author, John the Apostle, writes about the 7 seals that were broken when judgment was poured upon the earth. And if you read Revelation chapter 6, verse 15 to 17, this is what it says. Then the kings of the earth, the princes, the generals, the rich, the mighty, and everyone else, both slave and free, hid in caves and among and among the rocks of the mountain. They called to the mountains and the rocks, "Fall on us and hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of their wrath has come, and who can withstand it?" Judgment was taking place. God opened 7 seals, and each of these seals was a seal of judgment. And so terrible was the judgment on the earth that the peoples of the earth, especially the privileged of the earth, cried that the rocks and the mountains would fall on them, because that would be better than the judgment that they were facing. Seal number 1 to 4 were 4 horsemen that were released from heaven to judge the earth. And so if you read verse 1 and 2 of chapter 6, it says, "I watched as the Lamb opened the first of the 7 seals. I looked, and there before me was a white horse. Its rider had a bow, and he was given a crown, and he rode out to conquer, bent on conquest." The traditions of the church have named this first horseman as conquest. He came to conquer the kingdoms of the earth. The second horseman, verse 3 and 4, is named in the traditions of the church the horseman of war, because he was on a red horse, and he was given the power to bring war on earth. The third horseman, in verse 5 and 6, has been named the horseman of famine, because he was on a black horse. He held a pair of scales in his hand, which symbolically means judgment, that he was a judge, and he came among the peoples of the earth with a quart of wheat for a day's wages and 3 quarts of barley for a day's wages, to damage the food stock of the earth. The fourth horseman, in verse 7 and 8, was riding on a pale-colored horse, and his name was Death, and Hades was close behind him. These 4 horsemen were released from heaven to judge the earth for its wickedness. And so I got to think to myself, if there was such a thing, what would be the 4 horsemen of financial ruin? What are the 4 things that will ensure that when they attack us, we will never see wealth, we will never be able to amount riches? What are these 4 things? What are the 4 biggest mistakes that people make? What are the 4 trends of money management that will ravage you financially and ensure that you never see wealth? And actually, there are 4 things that stand out that will bring financial ruin to you if you are not attentive to ensure that they do not attack you. And so these are my 4 horsemen of financial ruin. The first horseman I have called hustler. The second horseman I have called enslaver. The third horseman I have called desolation. And the fourth horseman I have called the devourer. Watch out for these 4. Now, some of you here probably recognize them. I didn't fully understand finances and financial matters until I was 45 years old. That's almost about 7-8 years ago. For the first 20 years of my working life, for the first 20 years of my marriage, I was living filanga free. I didn't really have a plan. I didn't know what I was doing. I was just happy that we got a salary, both my wife and we bought groceries, and we met the bills, and we basically were surviving. We were hustling. And it wasn't until about the year, about 10 years ago or so, that I came across the first book ever that I read on financial management. And all of a sudden I realized I was in trouble. I was doing okay today, but I had no plan for the future, and I was in big trouble. And it was at that time that I began to seek wisdom about financial management. And this is what I want to share with you this month, okay? I want this to be a very practical, very down-to-earth series. I'm going to be sharing things that you can go and do in the immediate. I'll be sharing things from my life and my mistakes and the things that I have learned as a result. And I want to encourage you to listen well and to take notes where you can, because you cannot remember everything from memory, and yet this will be important for you in the years to come. Okay? Now, if you're 45 years old, you probably know these things. You probably learned them like I did, the hard way. And they're not new, but you need to be reminded, because we so easily drift and forget. But if you're young and you've never heard these things, I wish I was your age. I wish I could have known them when I was young. I wish somebody had taken me under their arm and they had taught me and coached me and enabled me to start well. Because I have 20 years of lostness and waste, if I could call them that. And except for the mercies of God, I could have been in a very bad position because I did not know. And so for those of you who are young, you will know, because I will tell you. And so you have no excuse but to go and do these things. You know, many of us do not consider ourselves to be wealthy. In fact, I bet you almost to a man that if I was to ask you here today, how are you doing and could you do with a little more money, all of us would say yes. We do not consider ourselves to be wealthy. We're struggling financially. We're making ends meet, but there are things we'd like to do that we can't do, and we do not consider ourselves to be wealthy. Well, let me say this, guys. You are. You are wealthy. Do you know how much the watchmen of this city earn as their monthly wage? Anybody want to hazard a guess for me? Call it out. How much does a watchman earn? Somebody is saying 6,000. Pardon? 6. 15,000. 15,000. That's a well-paid watchman. Most watchmen I know earn about 6,000, maybe 7,000 shillings. Very little. And these, we're not talking about, who are we talking about? We're talking about some of the well-uniformed watchmen who come from the big companies, and so they're paid well. I'm not talking about the Maasai who guards your gate. That one receives even less. There's a watchman in this city who takes home 7,000 shillings a month. And on that 7,000 shillings, that watchman is somehow managing to educate his children. Yes, it's free primary education and that's what he's using, but he's trying to educate his children. Somehow that watchman is trying to put food on the table every day of the month to feed his children. And yes, it's ugali and sukuma wiki every day. There is no variety, but he's trying to do it on what he takes home. And in addition to that, he has to clothe his children and he has to take them to hospital when they're unwell on 7,000 shillings a month. And that watchman is employed. The unemployment rate in this country and in this city is very high. Government statistics say in the city, it is 45% of people in the city are unemployed. It's probably higher than that because the government is very kind to itself. And it's probably 60% are unemployed or underemployed. You earn 20,000 shillings. You earn 25,000 shillings. You earn 50,000 shillings. There are those here who earn 100,000 shillings. There are those who earn 300,000 shillings and more. All of us consider ourselves to be financially struggling and we do not think that we are rich. But to the watchman who earns 7,000 shillings, when you tell him that you earn 30,000 a month, he cannot even begin to imagine that you have any financial problems. His greatest dream in life is one day to earn what you earn. And even though you consider yourself poor, in his eyes, you are extremely wealthy. So if I use the watchman as my baseline, that somehow he has a family, he's bringing up his family, he's caring for that family, if I use that watchman as my baseline, you are extremely wealthy. So, we agree. Are you feeling rich now? Bado, you're not feeling rich. But in somebody else's eyes, they look at you and they can't get over how much you have. In fact, that watchman, they sit down together at night, 2 o'clock in the morning, and they're saying, unajua mutajiri wangu, you know, my rich man that I guard, ati anaenda kwa duka, he goes to the shop and he buys water to pour on himself to smell nice. And it costs him 7,000 shillings. He oka chupa, because it's a small bottle, at the perfume, at the 7,000. Sasa, imagine what I could do with that money. You buy a perfume for 7,000 shillings, this he has never heard of. And so you are wealthy in comparison. My dear friends, one day you will stand in the presence of God. And God will ask you, what did you do with all the wealth that I placed in your hands through your years on earth? And you say, Aya, God, me, I never saw wealth. In fact, I was always struggling. I was hustling. You know, life was hard. And God says, wait a minute. Let me tell you your life story. It goes like this. You started work at 25 years. In 2014, I gave you a job where you earned 25,000 shillings a month. And then at the age of 27 years, You got a promotion to 35,000 shillings a month. At the age of 30 years, you are now promoted to be an assistant manager. You are earning 60,000 shillings a month. At the age of 35 years, your salary went to 140,000 shillings at a new job. At 40 years, your earning was 300,000 shillings a month. And at 45 years, which was your peak, at 45 years, I blessed you with a business, and you are now earning 900,000 shillings a month from your private business. At 55 years, which was your peak, your 3 businesses were earning you 1.5 million shillings a month. At 65 years, you slowed down. And so now you went back to 700,000 shillings a month. At 75 years, you are back to 300,000 shillings. And at the age of 85 years, when you finally passed away, before you came to stand here in front of me, you had handled a total of 500 million shillings through your life. What did you do with it? And the revelation of, hiya, 500 million. You mean from the time I started working, that's how much money went through my hands? And God says, yes, I gave you wealth. What do you have to show for it? Some of us will just faint because we have no response. If you've been working for 10 years, if you count all the money that has gone through your hands, this is wealth. And so you are wealthy. The question is, what are you doing with it? Now, the point is not the figure. For some of us, 500 million is what we use as change for our business. For others of us, we will never see that sort of money. The point is not the amount or the figure. What I really want to drum into you is this. God has made you a steward, and He has put wealth into your hands. What are you doing with it, and what do you have to show for it? Let me ask a question. How many of us here, we know this term, we're Kenyans, okay? How many of us here consider ourselves to be hustlers? You know that term that was used by our vice president, I'm a hustler. I sort of am making life whole together. How many of us consider ourselves to be hustlers? Anyone here? I can see quite a number of hands. Yes, we have a number of hustlers in this place. Shindwe here. I'll tell you why. The first horseman I have called hustler. Why have I called him this? This is a horseman who gets you to believe that you're a hustler, and a hustler is someone who's barely making it. They're scratching around doing 10 different things to make a living. They live hand to mouth. Life is hard and they have no financial security. Hustlers are very hardworking, very busy, but at the end of the day, they have nothing left in their pocket because it's all gone. It's money in and money out. It's making life hold together with rubber bands. It's hustling, but hardly making any advances. But let me say this. Hustling is first and foremost a poverty of the mind. Do not take pride in calling yourself a hustler. And this is where it begins. And this is what the first horseman does. Proverbs chapter 29 and verse 18 in the King James Version says, without a vision, a people perish. And the lie of the first horseman is to get you to live all your earning life without a financial vision except hustling. I'm a hustler. It takes hustling. I will be a hustler all my life, and there is nothing more that can be done about this. But let me say this differently. Without a financial vision of your future, you will perish. Put it a different way. If you want to create financial wealth in this life, you must have a vision. Without a vision, you will go nowhere. You've got to have a clear goal of what you want. Wealth begins in the mind. And the people who create wealth are people who have a dream and they live out that dream, whatever it takes. It's been shown over and over again that this is the case. Now, there's a world of difference between what I'm calling a vision and what I would call, maybe, let me call it, a hope. Okay? Maybe even a dream. There's a difference between these two things. A wish or a hope is, I want to be rich in this life. Full stop. But a vision is where I say, I want to be rich, and I do three things. Number one is I develop an action plan. Number two is that I define it with a deadline. And number three is that I exercise discipline. Financial discipline means denying myself today so that I can have enough tomorrow. Those three things turn a wish into a vision. Number one, I develop an action plan. Number two, I define a deadline. And number three, I exercise discipline. A goal is a dream, plus an action plan, plus a deadline, plus discipline. So let me ask you a question. Have you ever written down your financial plan? Turn to your neighbor and ask them, do you have a financial plan? Do you know where you want to be financially in 5 years? You see, many of us don't. You're like me at the age of 25. I had no financial plan. I was a hustler. I was living hand to mouth. I was happy. I was married. This was my dream come true, but I did not know where I was going financially. And it's not just about finances. Let me apply this in another area, an important area, okay? For those of you who are married here, do you have a vision of where your marriage is going? You see, you fell in love. You like this girl. She was so beautiful. You were attracted to her. The chemistry and the buzz. She was attracted back to you. And, sweetie, will you marry me? And she said yes. There couldn't have been a happier day in your life. And so you had a wedding, an amazing wedding. And now you're living in your house. And you look at each other and your eyes light up. But where are you going? Without a vision, a people perish. Let me suggest to you, many marriages fall apart because they have no vision. It was all about, sweetie, sweetie, I love you, I love you. That love, sweetie, sweetie thing issues after 3 months. And then where will you go? What is God's vision for your marriage? Where does God want you to go with this marriage? It's bigger than you. It's not just about you and your love for each other. You are servants of the King. Where is this going? And what is your vision for this marriage? Sini, we get married, okay. Sini, we rent a house, okay. Sini, we have children, okay. But where are you going? Let me challenge you on another front. Those of you who have children, what is your parenting plan for your children? You don't just get children and they grow up. There's a lot of work that goes into parenting. Take your 6-year-old this year. What is it you are hoping to instill in them as a 6-year-old in terms of values and character this year? And how is that different from your 10-year-old? Most of us do not have a vision. The kids are just growing up. See, you take them to school. Sini, the teachers are teaching them. Sini, they're growing up. They're taller today than they were yesterday. Sini, now they're teenagers, but there is no plan. And what we end up doing is raising brats. Because they're not going anywhere. They're like water spilled on the ground that flows in whichever direction it goes, because the parents have no plan. Without a vision, a people perish. Let's come back to finances. What is your financial plan for the next 5 years? And if you don't have one, you're in trouble. What is a plan? Let me give you a couple of examples, okay? I want to own my own house by the age of 45. My plan is to raise a deposit of 20% within the next 3 years, go to the bank and get financing for the balance of 80% so that I can pay a mortgage over the next 10, 15 years, and by the time I am 45 years old, I will have my own house. That's a plan. That's a financial plan. Because it means for the next 3 years, I need to put aside a certain amount. I want to buy a flat. It's going to cost me 15 million. 20% of that means that I need to raise 3 million in 3 years, 1 million a year. That means I need to put aside a certain amount of money per year to be able to buy that flat. And then go and get a mortgage with my 20%. That's a plan. Here's another plan. I want to be debt-free by the time I reach the age of 30 years. That means my health board, school fees, university needs to be paid up. Any monies I owe anyone, any bills on my credit cards, any money I owe, family, I want to be cleared with all that to be debt-free by the age of 30. It's going to mean that every month I have to put aside 15,000 shillings. It's going to take me 4 years to clear all my debts. But by the time I'm 30, I am debt-free. I do not owe anyone any money. That's a plan. It has a deadline. And it needs discipline. Here's another one. I want to build an investment portfolio of 1 million shillings over the next 4 years so that I can invest it in shares and in real estate and in treasury bonds and bills so that I can create wealth. That's a plan. It has a deadline, and it will take discipline to do it. What is your financial plan over the next 2 years, over the next 5 years, over the next 10 years? Even something as simple as, by the time I am 35 years old, I want to own my own car. What is your plan to get there, as opposed to it just being a wish? The road to financial hell is paved with good intentions, but with no concrete plans. And what this first horseman does, the hustler, is he takes away your desire, possibility to lay down a plan, because he makes you believe that you're a hustler and there is nothing more you can do but remain a hustler for the rest of your life. So, how do we stop the first horseman from ravaging us and denying us the opportunity to create wealth through life? That somehow we can become good stewards of what God is putting in our hands even now and will continue to do for the next 20, 30, 40 years of our working life. Let me suggest to you, good people, that there are 10 plans you need to set down. If you haven't pulled out your pen and paper, do it now. Because I want you to go home and I want you to think through these 10 plans and ask yourself, how have I planned for these 10 things? If you answer the question of these 10 plans, this will be your financial plan, and you'll be on the road to creating wealth. Okay? We're going to come back to some of these next week and the week following. For now, I just want you to know the 10, and then we'll look at a number of them next week and the weeks following. Okay? Here we go. The first plan you have to put down is a financial goals plan. What are my financial goals for the next 2 years, the next 5 years, the next 10 years, even the next 20 years. Where am I going financially? Without a vision, a people perish. So get your vision clear. Let me move on to the second one. We'll be saying a little more about this later on. The second plan that you need to put in place is a prayer plan concerning your finances. Let me explain that. Let's do some simple mathematics, okay? Turn to your neighbor and tell them the answer to this question, okay? What is 10 times 10? That one's easy. If you got that one wrong, Buana, you're in trouble, okay? What is 5 times 10? Also easy. What is 2 times 10? Okay? What is, let me make it harder, 0.02 times 10? Okay, even harder than that, 0.0000002 times 10. Okay, here's the next question. What is 0 times 10? You see, even God cannot multiply 0. Give God any number. Doesn't matter how big it is, how small it is, and He can multiply it. But He cannot multiply 0. Without a vision, a people perish. The way the New Testament puts it is that without faith, it is impossible to please God. If you bring 0 to God, then He cannot do anything with it. And if you do not have a financial plan, then even God cannot help you. And so the first thing to do is a financial plan. But when you have that plan, take it to God. Because He is the one who blesses. And He is able to take your dream and to multiply it to become that which you have asked Him. And to go to God and say, Dear Father, I need for you to enable me financially. And this is my simple plan. It's the best I can set before you. But by faith, I am looking to you to bless me. God will take that, and He is able to bless you above and beyond what you can imagine or believe. Because God is in the business of blessing His children. And so after you have your plan down, the next thing is to turn it into a prayer plan. I have a financial plan, and I pray through it on a regular basis. And I come to God and I tell Him, God, please bless. Please bless. May I be able to take my children through university. Give me the resources to be able to do that. Lord, I can only afford to put aside 10,000 shillings a month. And it's not going to be enough by the time they are ready for university. But Lord, I'm asking you as my Father in heaven, please take this that I have set before you and bless it so that it is enough. And God is able to answer. And so a prayer plan becomes plan number 2. Plan number 3, beyond a prayer plan, is a spending plan. What is a spending plan? The Bible says in Luke chapter 16 and verse 10, He who is faithful in very little will be faithful with much. In other words, if God is already putting resources in your hands, even if you don't feel that they are enough, if you are faithful with the little you have, God will entrust you with much. But if you don't even know where it goes, and you don't know how it's used, and you can't account for it, and it just disappears, it's as though your pocket has holes in it. At the end of the month, like we say as Kenyans, there is more month than there is money, and you are waiting for the last week for that salary to land in your account. Then if God blesses you with more, it will just mess you up. And He doesn't want to mess you up. So He'll leave you poor with the little you have so that your problems are small. Because if He gives you much, your problems become big. Okay? So how can I be faithful with the little that I have? Most people think that the golden rule of creating wealth is get a well-paying job, but it's not. The number one golden rule of creating wealth is this, that you must spend less than you earn. That's the rule. If you spend less than you earn, you're on the way to creating wealth. You can only spend less than you earn if you know where you're putting your money and how you're spending it. You have to have a plan. But you see, most of us don't work that way because, the truth be told, most of us live on 120% of what we earn. So every month, we're sinking a little deeper into debt, a little deeper on the credit card. We're sinking a little deeper. Our ATM cards have been sourced out, and so now we're paying 650 shillings on our account every month because it's empty. We're sinking a little deeper because we're borrowed from friends, and every month it just gets a little deeper into debt. We're living on 120% of what we earn. Most of us live by this rule. Let's fake it until we make it. Okay? So we live in Kilimani, we eat at Java, our children go to Hillcrest, we shop at, which shopping mall, but we're faking it in the hope that one day we'll make it. We look good, we drive a pretty car, we live in a nice car apartment, but we're sinking deeper into debt. If you want to be a good steward, here's the formula, okay? I'm going to give you a formula. It's not in the Bible. I don't pretend that this is something I pulled out of the Bible. This is wisdom that comes out of Kenya and where we are and, living in this city. My rule of thumb is this. If you're living on more than 60% of what you take home after taxes, you're living beyond your means. Go on quiet. Did you hear me? You take home 20,000. If your monthly expenditure is more than 60% of 20,000, you're living beyond your means. If you're living on more than 12,000, you take home 100,000. If you're spending more than 60,000 on all your expenses, rent and everything else, you're living beyond your means. How does that break down? Let's break it down so that you can see why 60%. 10% of what you receive, you want to give back to the Lord as a tithe. I preach a tithe. In the Old Testament, the Bible called for the people of God to give 10% of everything that God put in their hands as their way of saying thank you to the Lord. In the New Testament, we are called to give generously. And so I use 10% as the basis, as the foundation, as the zero ground for generosity. Because God has done so much more for us in the New Testament that in our giving generously, we give even with greater abundance than was the case in the Old Testament. And so 10% minimum goes to the Lord. That's my tithe. Another 10% goes into what I call an emergency fund. An emergency fund is a fund where when things really go wrong, I have put aside money that I can go to and be able to survive. When I have filled my emergency fund, I turn that emergency fund into an investment fund. I'll come to that in a minute, okay? So 10% is my tithe to the work of the kingdom. 10% is what I give to the emergency fund. The third 10% is my retirement fund. I'll come to that in a minute. The fourth 10% is what I call to replaceables. Because guys, all the equipment that you have around you is one day going to die. Let me explain. The car you're driving today is one day going to die. The iron that you use at home to press your clothes is one day going to die. Your microwave is one day going to die. Your TV set is one day going to die. Your fridge will die. Your cooker will die. All the implements and things that you have around you will one day die. Where will you get the money to replace them? And you know you can't say it was an emergency because you know that your car is going to die one day. You know that your washing machine is going to die one day. You know that your fridge doesn't have eternal life. One day they're going to die. And so you put aside a little each month so that you can replace these things. Let me say to those of you who are young here, the only car you should ever buy with a loan facility is the first car you ever buy. Never again do you use a loan to buy a car. How do you do that? Let's say I want to buy a jalopy, okay? One of those cars that, not even the mitumba that are coming from Dubai or Japan. Those ones are high-class cars. Watch a hizo, okay? I'm talking about the one that has been on the Kenyan road for at least 5 years. Those are the best cars as starter cars. When you drive a car out of the showrooms that are the, mitumba from Japan and such, immediately you drive out of the gate, the car loses 25% of its value. If you're to drive that car, go around the roundabout and come back and try and sell it to the guy who sold you 3 minutes ago, he'll tell you, Sasa hii imezoeka, this one now you have to sell at a throwaway price, 25% imeisha, just by driving it out for 2 minutes. So don't buy that. You're losing value against money. The best car to buy as a starter car is a car that has been owned by a Kenyan for 5 years. Because that one, when you drive away with it, it loses 2% of its value. I mean, it doesn't lose value if you know what I mean. That's the best car to invest in. And as a young person, I want to buy a car. And so I go and look for a car that will cost me 500,000 shillings. And I take a car loan. And it's going to be 20,000 a month for 3 years, something like that, okay? I take that loan, and for 3 years, I pay back until I have cleared the car. After I clear the car, what I must do is that the car must stay alive for a longer period of time than the loan. And so if I bought a car on a 3-year loan, I must squeeze this car to give me 6 years, okay? And after I have cleared the loan, I continue to put the 20,000 aside, not to the bank now, not to the car loan, but into a car investment fund for another 3 years. So that after 6 years, I paid my 500,000, I now have a fresh 500,000, and I can take this jalopy and sell it for 150,000, and now I can go and buy an upgraded car with the money, no loan. And the second car I buy now is one of those from Dubai. And this one will give me 7 to 10 years. And for those 7 to 10 years, I continue putting aside 20,000 shillings. After 10 years, I sell this car, I take the money in the bank, and I can go now and buy a new car from the showroom. You never buy a second car on a loan. Just the first car. That's what it takes. And so the replacement. And then finally, 10% has gone to replacement, 10 has gone to a retirement fund, 10 has gone to an emergency fund, 10 has gone into a tithe, and 60% is what I live on. That 60% means, if I may break it down a little, my rent should not take more than 15% of that balance. Some of you are living in estates and in houses that are beyond your means. Your school fees should not take more than 20% of that money. Your food should not take more than 10%. Perish those salamis and those sausages and those bacons. Those things are unhealthy for you. They have too many phosphates and they are killing you anyway. Githeri and ugali. These are fresh. They're healthy. They're straight from the garden. They build you up. Okay? 10%. Your utilities, 5%. And all other things like pocket money and entertainment, the balance of 10%. Do not be like the Kenyans, because this is a very Kenyan thing. When it comes to school fees takes almost 60% of your salary. Because the Kenyan philosophy of paying school fees is ujifinye na ujaribu until those children go through school, even if it kills you. And so we put our children in schools we cannot afford. And every month we're struggling, or every term we're struggling to find the money for school fees. My dear friends, be a good steward. I remember once a member of my congregation coming, and he pleaded with me, Pastor, please, can I take a loan? Can the church help me to pay my school fees for the children this term? I haven't paid, I'm in debt, and the children are being sent home. So, because we do have a scholarship fund for children at the chapel, we have 300 children that we're educating through high school. We said, I said, can we talk? Maybe we can help. When I met the guy, we met and he was driving a Range Rover. Those things cost something like 12 million, just the car itself. He was driving a Range Rover. We sat down together and he told me that his children were at Hillcrest School. They were paying 650,000 shillings, a term for school fees, and he was in a debt of 1.2 million. Can the church help him? I thought of a car that I had come without there, and I thought to myself, guy, if you want school fees, sell the Range Rover. I don't even know if this conversation why it needs to go on anymore. Sell the car, pay your fees, then you can go home scot-free with money in your pocket. No, because he was doing the Kenyan thing, that our children are in the most expensive school we can afford, and then we struggle year after year after year to educate them. The school fees should not take more than 20%. And just in case you wonder about myself, I put my own children in a Shao school where the fees were affordable. And the way I worked it out is I had 3 girls I needed to pay school fees for, so I looked at our budget, 20% comes to this amount, divided by 3, so no girls' fees can be more than this amount. Then all 3 of them can be in the school and will be able to pay without stress. It was a Shao school. Everybody thought, how can you put your girls in that school? Actually, it worked out very well for us. Because it was so Shao, nobody had children there. Just, the class had 15 kids, okay? Half the kids could not talk English because they were Chinese children who were put in that school just to kill time and to learn English. They weren't going to do the exam, and so, my children were getting Chinese lessons free of charge. Okay? You can't beat that. But anyway, I put them in that school. The teachers in the school were so desperate for good students that when they tagged my children as studious and hardworking and really trying to do well, the teachers focused on them. And my girls went through high school with teachers who really gave them time and tutored them because they were hardworking. My eldest daughter, when she did her O-levels, had the highest fashion, design, and art mark in the GCE in East Africa. Now, Bado, let me tell you, my second born, in the 7 subjects that she did for O-levels GCE, she had 5 A's and 2 B's. My third born also did 7 subjects. She had 6 A stars and 1 A. An A star means that you scored in the 95 and above percentile. And it was a Shao school. And it didn't cost much. We could afford it. And everybody was running away from the school. We said our children are going to go there. We'll homeschool them if we need to, but this is what we can afford, and this is where we'll take them. And so you must have a spending plan. And this, if you're living on more than 60% of your income, you're living beyond your means. Now go home and calculate where you are. You know, for those of you who are single, you don't have to be in your own flat. You don't have to be. When my kids were growing up and we built the house we live in, I told my daughters, even mom and dad share a room. Why should I build a room for you each? You'll also share like everybody else. And you can, if you're single, find a good roommate and share a flat together. Move out of Kilimani and go. You can actually get a house for less than 10,000 in Komarok. Why are you paying 60,000 in Kilimani and you can't afford it? Every end of month, you're hiding from the landlord. You're not picking up your phone calls because he might have changed his number. Move. You don't need to live in that posh place. Okay. Plan number 4 is a benevolence and tithe plan. Okay? The first plan we said was that you need a financial plan, financial goals. Second is a prayer plan. Third is a spending plan. 4 is a benevolence and tithe plan. Even with the Lord's money, plan for it and decide what you're going to do with it. This church is trying to get over the debt that it has. You can give towards that. Do you know what the Bible says in 2 Corinthians chapter 8 and verse 7? Paul writes and he says, now just as you excel in everything, in faith, in speech, in knowledge, in complete earnestness, and in your love for us, also excel in the grace of giving. We're all trying to grow spiritually. We're trying to grow in our faith. We're trying to grow in our love. But are you also trying to grow in your giving? Because Paul calls us, as in everything else, to also excel in the grace of giving. And so I have always taught, and you've heard me on this before, set aside 10% as your gift to the Lord. But every year, increase that by 1% so that you're growing. And when you go to 11%, set it aside for the poor. 12%, 13%, 14%, that 4%, set it aside for the poor around you. Support a child through school. Help your house help, who does what she does, not because this was her career path, but because her parents could not afford to take her to school, and she dropped out even though, having been given the opportunity, she should be in university. But she never got the chance. And so give her a career that is not house helping, but that is so much more. Your watchman. He's not a watchman because as a young boy he used to dream how one day he would be a watchman. He's a watchman because no other opportunity in life has come. So take him to driving school. Give him a trade. Let him do afternoon school. Help him set up his own little business. He has dreams like you have dreams. And you can help him. And so, your benevolence tithe plan. Plan number 5 is your earning plan. Once you have a good spending plan, the only way you can save more money for your financial goals is to earn more money. But before you go to your boss and stress them for a better salary, I want to ask you the question that God asked Moses, and that he asked the judges, and that he will ask you and I. What is that in your hands? You see, all of us here have 3 or 4 things that we could do right now that will make an income for us. Let me give you a couple of examples in my own life, okay? I have a friend. Her name is Beatrice. And one day Beatrice comes up and tells me in church, she's a librarian, okay? She comes and tells me in church, you know, Pastor, this week bees settled in my compound. And my reaction was like any other Kenyan woman, you know, bees, woo, you know, we need to get them out, get somebody to chase these bees away. They can sting my children, they could kill somebody. And then she stopped and she thought to herself, you know, this might be God's blessings that have come to me. And she thought, what if I put those bees into a hive and I harvest honey? Do you know that Beatrice today supplements her salary with a honey business? Because she got one hive, then two hives, then she started multiplying the hives. She doesn't live in an estate in Nairobi. She lives out in the country a little, and so they have property, and she started multiplying the hives. You think I'm a fool? I thought to myself, even me. I live on a 1-acre property. I immediately went and bought for myself 2 hives. Last week, laugh with me, last week, we harvested 20 kilos of honey. I'm in the process of sealing off my attic. You know that empty space between the ceiling of the room and the roof, the concrete tiles? There's all that space in your attic that never does anything. This is even God's blessing to me. I'm sealing it off, and I want to put 10 hives in my attic. So my wife asked me, and if the bees come into the house, I tell her, where will they come? It's sealed, it has a ceiling, there's no way they can come in, and we have access that is separate from the house. I want to put 10 hives in the ceiling. When you see me driving a Range Rover, you just know it was my bees. You joke with me. But it's not just that. Every one of us has this. Some of you are teachers, you can tutor. Some of you are accountants, you can do jobs on the side for little, small, and medium enterprise businesses. Some of you have artistic skills, you can paint and sell it off. We all have 3 or 4 things you can do. Okay, here's another one. I live on an acre of compound, okay? And I get thinking to myself, I have to have guard dogs because of where we live, okay? What if I breed guard dogs? And so I've gone and I have gotten myself 2 female puppies, Rottweilers. Do you know the Rottweiler dog? It's the one the Israelis were using when there was a bomb blast of the American embassy. You remember those dogs that were sniffing people out? They're black, they're big, they're 45 kilos in weight, and they have red eyes. The last thing you will see if you're a crook on my compound were 2 eyes coming for you, and then you are gone. Those are Rottweilers. Each puppy costs 120,000 shillings. Wow. Okay? But I have 2 male full-grown Rottweilers, and I have 2 females. They take 2 years to grow up. You breed them, and they give you 8 to 10 puppies twice a year, and you sell the puppies for 120,000 shillings. And so me, I've got it made. I don't know about you, okay? But I'm breeding Rottweilers so that I can sell them on the market. And yes, they cost a lot in initial investment, but they give you a return. And I've done this for many years, and so I know that to be the case. Some of you here have a car that you take to the office, you park it out in the sun in the company parking, and then you go in, you work from 8 o'clock in the morning until 5 o'clock. 5 o'clock, you come, you get in your car, you drive home. That car has sat there, and it could have made money for you as a taxi the whole day. Now it's just baking in the sun. It's a useless asset that eats your money when it could actually fuel itself if you could find a driver and he does taxi work during the day. Each of us has 5, maybe 4 different ways. I have a friend in the US who has a gift of the gab. He really likes talking, he's always talking, he's cracking jokes. He decided that he's going to learn public speaking skills and become a professional MC at weddings and at events. He is now hired by companies to MC their events as an income stream. We all have this. And so what's your earning plan? And the question that God asks you is, what's that in your hands? Even before you ask for a salary raise. You can stitch, you can sew, you have fashion tendencies, you can do deco. There's so many things that all of us here can do to generate an income on the side. So that's plan number 5. Plan number 6 is an emergency plan. Here's a question I have for you, okay? What would happen to you if you lost your job tomorrow? You go to the office and they tell you they're downsizing and we're very sorry, but we will not be able to continue to hire you and your job does not exist forthwith. What would you do? And if it takes you 6 months before you get your next job, what will you do in the meantime? Will you be able to pay rent? Will your children have to be pulled out of school? Do you have emergency funds that can tide you over so that you can even take a break and then look for a job and then finally settle down? The commitment that my wife and I have made is to put aside enough emergency funds that we can cover the cost of being out of a job for at least 6 months without needing to look for a job. So that if we did lose our job, we're not under stress, but have 6 months to get a job. And we can rest, we can take a break, and then we can look. We're not under stress that the job has to be before the end of the month so that I can pay my rent. We have 6 months worth. Now, think of how much you spend a month. Let's say your monthly budget is, I don't know, 20,000. Let's just start with 20,000. If you put aside 10%, that's 2,000 shillings. How long will it take you to have 6 months or 3 months worth of your salary so that you have an emergency fund? Do the maths quickly. How long does it take? Okay? Anyone calculated that? It will take you somewhere in the range of 5 years to put aside the equivalent of 3 months, 6 months emergency fund so that you don't need to be stressed. And so you need to get with the program now because it takes so long. But then you have the security of knowing that I'm not dependent on my job to survive from hand to mouth. I have enough reserves that if that sort of emergency came up, I can deal with it. And it's not just that, illness. Your father calls and says your mother has collapsed, she's in hospital, they need 50,000 to be able to admit her. You can act immediately because you have the funds. Do you have an emergency fund, which I would define as 3 to 6 months worth of living, set aside, not to be touched? Now, our emergency fund is kept in a joint account that we both have to sign to. And I have told my wife, keep the checkbook and don't give me money, no matter how nice and sweet I'm being. Oh, you know, sweetie, you're looking so beautiful. Can you give me a check? Don't listen to me because I'm the spender in the family and she's the frugal one. So she keeps it so that I can't touch it. Okay? I also like gizmos. If you ever want to give me a birthday present, give me a gizmo. I like cameras, I like computers, I like, tablets, I like iPhones, I like phablets, I like any gizmo I love. And if I can somehow squeeze some money from the emergency fund and go and buy myself a smartwatch, I will do it. And so she keeps it. We both have to sign to the account. And I tell her, don't give me under the pain of death, even if I'm trying to sweet talk you. Don't listen to me, okay? Do you have an emergency fund? That is number 6. Number 7, once you're done with your emergency fund, then turn it into an investment plan. For the young ones here, let me tell you the second secret of creating wealth. It's called the power of compounding interest. What that means is, if you're 25 years today and you put 100,000 shillings in bonds, Kenyan bonds, return of 10 to 12% per annum, okay? And you leave it there and only go to look at it when you retire at the age of, 80, 85 years, that 100,000 shillings would have become 30 million shillings at the end of that time, after 60 years. That's what investment is about. An investment plan allows you to invest to create wealth. It's not the emergency plan. It's not your monthly budget. It's not your saving plan. It is there specifically for investments. We'll talk about it later. Number 8 is an insurance plan. If you passed away today, what would your dependents do? And do you have insurance? Life insurance? Or maybe, let's not even talk about passing away. Let's say today you are involved in an accident and you are paralyzed from the neck downward. You cannot work anymore. You cannot be employed. You need to be looked after. So you're spending money and you're being taken care of. How would your family survive? Would the children have to be pulled out of school? How would you cover the cost of looking after yourself? Do you have insurance? You know, we often think of insurance as a waste of money. But unless you have the reserves to take care of those sorts of situations, you need to have insurance on your life and on disability and on medical and those sorts of things. And it is not a waste. It protects your dependents. So do you have an insurance plan that you can look to if things fell apart? Number 9 is a retirement plan. The Lord and I have an agreement, or I think we have an agreement. He hasn't actually signed it off, but we're talking, okay? And the agreement is this. I want to work until I am 70 years old. Okay? God, give me strength to continue shepherding and pastoring until I'm 70 years old. When I'm 70, I want to retire from the pastoral ministry. And for the next 10 years, I want to invest myself in mentoring and in coaching pastors and, young leaders for the next 10 years, up until the age of 80 years. Okay? And then I'm asking the Lord for 5 years to do things like, maybe travel to Hawaii, maybe travel to Tokyo, those things that you look forward to at the end of your life. And then at the age of 85, I'm asking him, take me home. And the reason is this, okay, for those of you who want to live to be 95, 100 years old, okay, you retire at the age of 75 and you're going to die at 100. You need to put aside a retirement fund that can look after you for 25 years. And your children are not a retirement plan. Okay? 25 years. I don't want to try and develop a 25-year retirement fund. And so I'm saying, Lord, let me work, be strong enough to work to 80. At 85, I'm ready to come home. I live it up. I go to Tokyo, I go to Hawaii, and then when the money is finished, pop, call me home. So your retirement plan. What is your retirement plan? If you want to set aside a retirement plan wisely, begin at the age of 25. Just 10% at the age of 25. Do it with discipline all your life, and you will have enough at the end of life. The rest of us will retire into poverty because we didn't have any funds when we retired. Okay, number 10, the last one, is an estate plan. An estate plan. What is an estate plan? It is this thing Kenyans don't like. You need to have a will. Kenyans say, apana, I don't want to write a will because if you write a will, you are inviting death to come and take you. But what happens when you're involved in an accident that you do not survive? And your dependents do not know what your assets were. They do not know what your bills were. They do not know what properties you owned. They do not know whether they should sell the house to educate the children. They have no plan. There is no will. They do not know what the future would hold because you never talked about it. You never wrote it down. An estate plan is an act of love for your dependents. And if you're single and you don't have any dependents, you don't need that one. If you're elderly, your dependents are long gone, and maybe you own no property, then you don't need that one. But if you do own property, even if you're elderly and your children are adults, they will fight tooth and nail over your property unless you had an estate plan to keep peace in the family. But it's especially important for anyone here who has children. If you and your spouse died, what would happen to your children? Who would their guardian be? What assets would your guardian have to educate your children and to care for them? You must have an estate plan. Well, let me conclude with this thought. Those 10 things are the things that make for a good financial plan for your life. Some of these you can go and begin immediately. Before next week, sit down and look at how you're spending your monthly salary. What percentage is going into your household, rent, those sorts of things. And you can begin to make changes immediately. Ask yourself, how can I earn more than I am paid? What do I have in my hands that God has given me that I can do something with? Some of you have land in Home Squared that does nothing. It just sits idle. Rent it out so that it can bring an income for you. You have a cow that you are given when you got married or when the dowry was paid. What do you do with that cow? Milk it. Sell the milk. Eat it. God has already answered the question, what are you doing about it? And before next week, you can come back and say, we sat down, we thought through, we have a budget, we are planning, these are the goals. I want to own my house, I want to buy a car, it's going to take me 15 years, but I'm going to start putting aside, I have worked out a budget that allows me to do this and begin on the road to financial health. But you must start somewhere. And so let me leave it there. Next week we'll come back and we'll be looking at the second horseman, who, as I said a little earlier, is called the enslaver. God bless you. Let's pray together. Why don't you rise to your feet, please? Father, we pray that these truths that we've heard would be things we would take to heart and allow to change our lives. For some of us, it will take more than that, Lord. It's not just that we didn't know these things and now that we do. Sometimes it's that we lack discipline. Sometimes it's that we're filled with fear. Sometimes it's that we just don't know where to begin because we're feeling that we're so deeply in debt. We're sinking, we're drowning. We need immediate relief. Father, our prayer is that you would be merciful towards us. You would hear our cry and you would help us. Take us by the hand and walk us out of our place of need into the place of abundance. I want to pray especially for those here, Lord Jesus, who do not even yet have a job, and pray that you would help them to keep their eyes focused on you, to never give up, to continue to look to you to open up opportunities and doors for them, and to be asking the question, even as I wait, what is it that God has put in my hands? For it may well be that you have already given them an answer to their prayer. For all of us, Lord, help us to be good stewards of the resources that you have and continue to pour into our hands. For this we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. God bless you. Have a great week. Amen.